to Village Church Connections. I'm David Pavey. Some time ago, I read a book entitled Rumors of Another World by the celebrated author Philip Yancey, who wrote it specifically for those who live in what he calls the borderlands of belief, the region between belief and unbelief. Quote, he wrote it for those who were skeptical of religion and turned off by the church, which is why he entitled it Rumors and not Proofs. Yancey wants us to consider the possibility of an unseen, supernatural world of beauty and purpose coexisting with our visible world. In Rumors of Another World, Yancey describes an experience that he once had in Costa Rica. I read it a decade ago, but I've never forgotten it, so I thought you might appreciate it too. Let me share it with you now. Here's what Yancey wrote. One night in Costa Rica, I joined a guided expedition to a government reserve in order to observe a natural phenomenon: giant leatherback turtles laying their eggs. The guide used a red-filtered flashlight so as not to disorient the turtles, and at midnight we trudged for almost a mile along the beach, its sand still warm from the day's sun, until we found a turtle preparing her nest. The turtle reached down in the soft sand, one muscular flipper at a time, to scoop out and then fling the sand behind her. As she worked her way down, each scoop required more and more effort. The sand got wet and heavy, and she had to fling it above the rim of the hole she was digging. Eventually, she reached a depth of 3 feet, her body fully submerged in sand. And now each flinging of the sand thrust her whole body to the side, and despite her best efforts, much of the sand still fell back into the trench. She scooped it up and again slung it toward the surface. We tourists from Germany, Holland, Costa Rica, and the United States stood in silence late into the night, spellbound, watching this primordial drama. The crashing surf made a rhythmic soundtrack, and silvery clouds drifted over the moon. The mother turtle heaved and gasped, her mouth opening and closing, like a fish laboring to breathe. And finally, after an hour's hard work, the trench satisfied her, and she began to drop shiny white eggs the size of billiard balls. They glistened in the moonlight, gelatinous. We counted at least 60. The last few eggs were smaller, also infertile, said the guide, so that if predators uncovered her nest, these would go first. Her task accomplished, the leatherback clambered slowly out of the nest and began a 45-minute process of filling it in with the sand. Her powerful front flippers, made dexterous by separate fingers, could toss sand 10 feet behind her. She filled the trench, tamped the sand delicately as with loving care, added more on top, packed it too, and then made a wide circle of disturbed sand to confuse any predators. Exhausted, she lumbered off, dragging herself on the sand and resting every 3 or 4 strokes toward the sea. We watched as the smallest waves, their foam glowing in the moonlight, repeatedly pushed her back towards the shore. But at last she gained the strength to lunge past the waves, dipped her head beneath the surface, and disappeared. The guide informed us that the mother turtle weighed almost a ton and was probably 100 years old. I said 100. The largest reptiles on Earth, leatherbacks, don't even breed for the first 60 years. I said 60 years, 60. And of course, the mother never sees the results of her efforts. When the babies hatch, they burrow to the surface and make a mad dash to the sea, with only a third surviving the onslaught of coyotes and raccoons and seagulls. The sea poses many more dangers, and few of the baby turtles live to lay eggs themselves. But those who do will unfailingly return in 60 years to the same beach in Costa Rica, one of only 3 beaches frequented by leatherbacks. Revisiting the site the following morning, I could barely make out the camouflaged nest. Tracks like those made by a large-wheeled all-terrain vehicle led from the nest to the sea. The mother turtle's flippers had made the rounded furrows, and between them I noticed a much more shallow one, made by her dragging tail. I sat on a piece of driftwood and thought of the immensity of the world within the sea. How little of the creation do we humans understand, much less control. The wonders of instinctual behavior, the rhythms of nature that go on, whether any humans observe them or not. The comparative smallness of human beings. I made a conscious choice to turn the memory of the previous night into an act of gratitude or even worship. It had put me in my place. It's hard to dwell on the mysteries of the natural world and continue to live in the borderlands of belief. Thank you for tuning in once again to Village Church Connections.